Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Beaver Banter Podcast. I'm CJ Baumgartner. Over on the other side of the screen is Ian Rivers, and in the middle is Lucas of Beaver Territory, once again joining the Beaver Banter Podcast. Lucas, great to have you back on. How's it going?
It's going good. We're finally in the off season now of college hockey where all the fun things happen. And, you have a nice 6 month season followed by 6 months off and, just getting going with that. The icebreaker tournament's only 180 days away. So be here before you know it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It always feels like such a short season, but it's long at the same time. Like you think back and how are we in the playoffs already? But then you're like, yeah, I guess October was a long time ago. So it kind of just, especially when you're having a bad season, it goes by slow. If you're having a good season, it kind of goes by too fast. So
Yeah, it's old, the old Tom's Territory adage where the season's a marathon, but that second half is a sprint. Like the second half of a season from January on goes by so quick when you're playing every weekend. And yeah, it's a shame it ended when it did and how it did, but that was a fun year to be a Beaver hockey fan. So
Yeah, I think before we get things started off, we got a lot of stuff to talk about with the transfer portal, and we're going to break that all down. But you mentioned the season, and I guess since this is the first time we've had you on in a while, just talk about what was your favorite memory, Lucas, of this hockey season?
oh, that's a good one. Winning the McNaughton Cup's definitely the best memory. Being in the building for that, finally being able to see this team raise a trophy on home ice. Something that they hadn't done since my freshman year in college, or I guess my sophomore year in college. I mean, that was a really special time. So, um, certainly some good individual games throughout the season as well. I think dominating Mankato this year was special. Just getting the 3 or 4 from them. Yeah. Overall, though, I mean, just fun. I mean, there's so many good memories, so many individual plays and players. Some still on the team, some that have moved on to greener pastures, and yeah, it was just a good time all around.
yeah, I mean, for me, it's got to be just like Lucas said, being there for the Mankato series, and even to a lesser extent, maybe the Mason Cup championship game, just the atmosphere, especially in the first little bit of that game, and seeing an absolutely packed house at the Sanford Center. Like you said, the result on the ice wasn't what we wanted, but I don't regret making the 7 hour round trip drive to just be able to experience that atmosphere. I really, really enjoyed that game, except for, maybe at the end when we scurried out a little bit quicker than we wanted to. But yeah, I think that's the pretty easy pick. I mean, seeing individual players kind of come up. I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, but like just seeing the jumps from players that we really didn't expect to see jumps from, like Kyle Loft, seeing the fourth line's improvement over the course of the season, seeing guys like Jopi have a kind of a renaissance to their game and find line mates that really gel well with them, and really to see every line have success at some point this season. Offensively and defensively. Eric Polkamp, bless his heart, he was awesome to watch for a year, and now he is ring chasing, going to the champions, Denver. So I'll refrain from comment further on that. But yeah, there was so much that was exciting to watch this season for the Beavers, and I'm excited at what the future can hold for this team.
Yeah, I think one big thing is how much growth and development you saw from last year's freshmen, this year's sophomores. When you look at what Adam Fleming and Kirkland Irie, Mitch Wolf, all those sophomore defensemen in the seasons they had, that's a really promising development for the future years here. Even with losing Leighton Road from that class, that's current sophomore going to be junior class will be so critical for this team in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, this was just a really fun season. And for me, I think you guys went to the Mason Cup game, you guys went to the McNaughton Cup games. I went to the one in the middle. I went to the Lake State game, and just seeing that one was fun because I got to see the packed Sanford Center. I got to see the atmosphere, and I got to see them send Lake State home with the tail between their legs. From watching them completely dominate a hockey game like that, it was my first trip back to the Sanford Center since I was in college. And for that to be kind of a welcome back game, it spoiled me a little bit because of how fun that environment was. So that was my favorite memory. And like even watching the game, like that build up to the Mason Cup championship game was one of the most excited I've been for a hockey game in a really, really long time. And I think that, that week from the day of the Lake State game up until that next Friday was probably just one of my favorite moments of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what we live for, right? Like as Beaver fans is times like that. You can argue that it would have been just as exciting waiting for an NCAA tournament game. I probably, but I mean, just to be able to have that
Likely.
community feeling in Bemidji, have it be in Bemidji to host a championship game there, I think would have been equally, if not a little bit more like special when you talk about, in terms of, yeah, they could probably win the Mason Cup. And then, it's a little bit different when you're going into a game against a juggernaut like Boston College with hopeful optimism. But either way, we saw how Michigan Tech fared, and we couldn't even beat Michigan Tech. So not that that's what I think would have happened to the Beavers, but yeah, I think that it's a really special atmosphere that they were able to create at that building. And I hope that we can get more stuff like that. Obviously we talked about you're not going to recreate that for a regular season game against almost any team in the country. But we would love to be in a position in the future to recreate more playoff atmospheres like that. And then hopefully, if we can consistently be up at the top, maybe now the quarterfinal round seems more exciting. And obviously there's spring break and everything that goes into that too. So tons of hoops to jump through, but we've got the foot in the door, I think.
A lot of great stuff with that. And like you talked about, just getting that started and kind of rebuilding that atmosphere is really, really fun. And it's going to be exciting to see what next year's team looks like. Of course, it's not going to be the same that this year's was, and that's typical college sports stuff, but the transfer portal has certainly thrown a brick on that accelerator for the Bemidji State Beavers. So Lucas, just overall gut feeling, going to hit you with this one. How do you feel about Bemidji State post portal?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm hoping the team is still a little bit active in the portal. I'm hoping that all the transactions there haven't been made yet, because I still think this team needs probably one more defenseman out of it. Just with Logan Atchison entering the portal here today. You have him leaving, Eric Polkamp obviously leaving, and then also a couple of forwards and Jakub Lewandowski and Alexander Lundman. I think the additions that they brought in so far definitely plugged some holes that this team looked like they were going to have on paper. Carter Randclev was the leading scorer at Niagara, former Mr. Hockey finalist from Moorhead, a guy that had 30 points last year. So I think that's a guy that you expect to have it, somewhere in the 25 to 30 point range here as well next season. AJ McCauley from Alaska Fairbanks is a kind of a puck moving defenseman, but he played 20 minutes a game last season for the Nanooks, and he played on the power play, played on the penalty kill. So he's going to be a guy that plays either on the first or second pairing for us for sure. So, the holes that have been made by the transfer portal and by early departures with guys going pro, I think that the coaching staff's done a good job in filling those so far. And, they have some good talent coming up in the recruiting class, the guys, the freshmen that are going to be here next year. So, so far, I think it's been a good start to the offseason, but there are still a couple of question marks that I have, and hopefully we'll get some answers on here shortly.
Yeah, I think that when you look around the conference, especially, and see what other teams have lost, the Beavers are in a pretty okay position. Obviously, you've lost tons of production with Leighton Rhodes signing early to go play with Seattle or Coachella Valley as he's currently playing. Kyle Loft, of course, not an early departure, somebody that wouldn't have come back either way, but he just signed with the Texas Stars, the AHL affiliate of the Dallas Stars. So congrats to Kyle, a well-deserved contract there. And we'll touch on that in a little bit. But yeah, Eric Polkamp, the other guy who, I mean, that when you combine 24 to 30, that's 54 points lost, that you were hoping to get back next season with Leighton Road and Eric Polkamp leaving earlier than expected. And you got to try to fill those holes somehow. And I think that offensively, maybe McCauley isn't quite as good as Eric Polkamp. At least he wasn't this last year. But again, we saw guys take jumps this season that we didn't expect. So that could happen with anybody on the team. And I think, getting a guy like Rancliffe in from Niagara, who you already saw had a really successful season in a pretty comparable league to the CCHA, I think he can help replicate some of those lost points. And then again, you hope that some of these freshmen this year, such as the guys on the fourth line, Jake McLean, Reese Chinton, and then even Casper Magnuson can take a little bit more of a step, just like Flamang and Irie did, and then help shoulder some more of that load. So that would be very beneficial.
Yeah, and especially on the blue line too, you're not going to replace the production of Eric Polkamp with one player. I don't know what he had, 11 goals, 12 assists or something like that. Like it's going to have to be a group effort to replace that. And you have guys like Mitch Wolf who took a big jump this last season. You probably can expect more production from next year offensively as well. Vince Corcoran's a very gifted offensive defenseman as well. And then, AJ McCauley definitely has shown some signs of having, skills offensively as well. So, a combination of those guys will kind of have to make up for some of that production you're losing between Polkamp and Loft for sure.
Yeah, Polkamp, 11 goals, 13 assists. So very close, very close. But that's a lot. And I'm repeating what I said a couple weeks ago, but we were not in a preferable situation last year. We were very concerned about how we were going to replicate some of that blue line offensive talent that we lost. And two guys came in and filled those holes. So we'll see who can do it. And if they will do it next season, I think that it's just kind of the way the Beavers play. They get a lot of production from their blue line guys. I think we're in a pretty good spot. You could have told me weeks before the season ended that Rode and Polkamp were both going to be gone in their own respective fashions. And I would have very much believed you. And I think that in the back of my mind, CJ asked me a question a couple weeks ago, and I should have included it in my answer. It's like, which would be more like heartbreaking or something, like losing that Mason Cup championship game, or I can't remember what the other option you gave me was, but I think it was the Mason Cup game. And part of that is because in the back of your mind, you were worried about some of that production leaving early. And you think if those two come back, all right, the Beavers are front runners to win the CCHA again next year. And now you've got to find ways that you hope that guys can take those jumps. But what if they don't? You know what I mean? So now it's just a little bit more of a question. And I think you had your best chance that you're going to have maybe in a while, maybe not. But it took us a while, to get back to this position of back on top of the CCHA. So we'll see if we can replicate that. I think we're in a better spot now than we were like the last time we won the McNaughton Cup, losing so much senior production. But only time will tell. These guys have to come back in and put the work in, and I think that they can. But I think that was part of the reason why that game sucked to lose so much, just because of the fact that you knew in the back of your mind you might be losing a lot of offensive production.
Yeah, and we honestly have even mentioned that there's still a handful of fifth-year seniors that we haven't gotten, current seniors that could potentially come back for a fifth year that we really haven't gotten confirmation on. We just have strong leanings that they're all coming back.
Right.
If that changes, that also creates some pretty large holes offensively too. Guys like Jackson Jennings, Eric Martin, Austin Jopi were all, 20-plus point scorers this last season. Them coming back would be huge. Any of them coming back would be huge. And if they are all three coming back, then that's, a really promising thing for next season.
Yeah, I think you kind of, I hate it because I think it's Tom that just keeps it so close to the vest, and it just doesn't. What if last year we figured it out because Jones and Loaf were named captains of the team? What if one of these guys isn't named a captain of the team, and then we just have to wait for the roster to get released?
There's other programs out there love announcing, so-and-so's coming back for their fifth year, unfinished business. And for whatever reason, we just don't do that.
Right. So we've kind of just been tiptoeing around it, kind of under the assumption that these three will be back. We've heard rumors, but nothing's solid yet. Like, yeah, like you said, any of those three guys coming back would be very helpful. I think you can kind of look at what we've done in the transfer portal to kind of fill those holes. Not that we don't have a lot of forwards on the team and we could field the team, even if we lost two of those guys. But I think some of the depth pieces like Lundman and Lewandowski transferring out, you might not see that if all three of those guys were leaving, just because they would probably have pretty prominent roles on the team, at least as fourth liners, if they were all going to leave.
I think that's a pretty telltale sign. Yeah. Especially when you look at the recruiting or the guys that are committed to the program right now and kind of when you're expecting them to come in, the roster is pretty much set if you include those three guys. So, unless, they start signing more prospects here shortly, that'd be the only kind of giveaway that they might be losing one or two of them.
Yeah.
So kind of moving things along with the portal discussion. Obviously, we've mentioned before, Ian touched on a little bit earlier, is Polkamp leaving and going to Denver. Lucas, what do you think of that move? What do you think? Why does, for somebody who's, a layman in the college hockey landscape, how would you explain this kind of move to him, to that person?
Yeah.
That person also may be me.
I think that decision might have had some external influence on it. That's, it's when you're a draft pick of an NHL club, there's going to be pressure on you to kind of do what that club wants you to do. And there was kind of a decision there, is it better for Eric Polkamp's development to play 25 plus minutes a night for Bemidji State in the CCHA, or is it better for his development to play with a bunch of other NHL draft picks, maybe play second or third pairing defensemen, but play in the NCHC, and play against a much higher level of competition? What's better for your development? And to be honest, he's proved that he can dominate a league like the CCHA as a freshman, and play those big minutes already and play in all situations. So I think it makes a lot of sense for a player like him to now move on to what's perceived as a higher level of competition, see how he measures up against that competition. And then, the Sharks or whoever can kind of judge what the next steps are for him in his development.
So a couple of the other guys that have left was obviously Leighton Rowe. That was one of the big ones. Just talk about that transition and kind of what do you think he can do at the next level?
Yeah, I mean, he went to the Seattle's development camp last summer, and they obviously saw, some things that they liked from him. Former Beaver, it's Eddie Olczyk that's the scouting director, or one of the scouts for Seattle, right? So obviously there's a connection there. And yeah, I mean, obviously he's a great 200-foot player. Had an opportunity to sign a professional deal, and a guy that went undrafted. I can't blame him at all for taking that opportunity and running with it. And I think he's going to have great success. Tremendous guy, tremendous player. Wish him all the best going forward, because yeah, I mean, that's just an opportunity that you can't pass up. And I should mention too, I think when you have players sign early like that, I think that's good for the program. I think that shows, potential players or potential recruits that Bemidji State's a place that you can go to develop into a professional level or caliber player and make that jump to the next level. And you don't have to go to a bigger school to do that. You can go to, a smaller school like Bemidji, get the playing time and develop here and be a good player.
And I think that's been something over the last 10 to 15 years even that's improved for the smaller schools, is the advancement of social media, especially now, makes it so that scouts, you used to want to go to a
easier
premier,
to get tape on all the games.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big point too, is like you used to see players from any sport going to the bigger universities if they had the opportunity, because that's where you get noticed. Now it's easier to get noticed at a small school. So I don't think it's quite as big of a detractor from a school like BSU or any school like in the CCHA, that yeah, you'll get noticed no matter where you're going to play. We've got eyes on you anywhere. So I think that definitely helps. Yeah, of course, Leighton, a terrific player, 30-point scorer both years that he was here. And I expect big things out of him. The last player that we had leave after 2 years and go sign a pro contract won a Stanley Cup. So I think that we'll see some success out of Leighton. I think he's a hell of a forward. And yeah, I will add one thing about Eric Polkamp and where he ended up. I think that there is something to be said about who the coach of the U.S. World Junior team was and where Eric Polkamp ended up going and playing college hockey where he will end up. Sorry, I'm stuttering over my words, but there may have been some conversations had in December and January with Coach Carl there.
Are you alleging tampering, Ian?
I would never allege tampering in today's age of college sports.
The ironic thing there is, what NHL team is now going to go after Matt Carl, and where's he going to end up coaching next year? Is he going to stay with Denver, or is he going to move on to a professional gig too? Because he's certainly a hot name in the coaching community now, and I think those opportunities will be there for him to take the next step too.
Yeah, 100%. And that's been a buzz as he's now won yet another national championship with Denver. And kind of depends on who you ask, but unexpected from me, to say the least. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of players signing pro contracts, obviously we had Carter Jones sign with the ECHL with the Norfolk Admirals. And then the one I do want to touch on quite a bit is give Kyle Loft his flowers, because I think we all talked about earlier today. This is not a guy that we expected coming back for his 5th year to be in a position at the end of the year to sign a contract, maybe even with an ECHL team at the pro level. But he more than earned this with his play on the ice this year, and I can't think of a more deserving guy than Kyle Loft.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly took advantage of the COVID year. Typically players wouldn't have had this opportunity to come back for a 5th season, and all he did was come back and have his most points, pretty much ever in any season at any level. Well deserved for him. Was just a tremendous leader. I mean, he has all the intangibles too. It's not just that he's put up good a lot of points this season. He was a captain of this team for 2 years. He kills penalties. He plays on the power play. He's a leader in the locker room. He's got everything that you want to have from a player on your team. And the Texas Stars, I think, are lucky to have him. Obviously, they signed up. They only have 2 games left in the regular season, so it's just going to be an amateur tryout with that AHL club. But wish him all the best too. I think he's going to be able to make a name for himself, hopefully in the AHL. Maybe he has to drop down to the ECHL for a year or two, but that's a great opportunity for him. So nothing but the best for him.
Yeah, and you touched on it earlier, Lucas, of just it's a good sign for your program when you can have guys go on and be successful. And obviously White Cloud, as Ian mentioned, is the big thing that you can tout around. But how much is it for a program just to be able to tout that for coaches, to be able just to say, we can get you to that next level?
Yeah, I mean, every junior hockey player has that ambition of playing professionally, whether, in the US or in Europe. So when you can say that, we took this guy in, he wasn't wasn't a high profile recruit. We developed him for 4 years, and now he's making money at whatever level, whether it's Elias Rosen in the SHL, Will Zamolik, and now Kyle Loft in the AHL. It's such a good selling point to have when you bring a recruit on campus and you can point to people, point to specific examples of how you've developed a player similar to that recruit and developed him to be a professional hockey player.
And definitely with guys that are a little bit overlooked as well in juniors, that's a big selling point because, they might not have the same aspirations that a guy like Jimmy Snuggerud has coming out of, I think he's from St. Louis area. He's like an NHL draft pick early on, like guys like Eric Polkamp, who are a late bloomer, and you hope to get some of those guys on campus and have them have success here over a multi-year career. And I think building a strong sense of community within your team is something that the Beavers have benefited from. I mean, you look at the transfer portal and really when it's opened up, we've lost a few guys in the past, but last year we didn't lose a single player. This year, I think you can argue that all of the players that are leaving are circumstantial, probably to the extra COVID year and just other transfers coming in. I don't think, especially with Atchison, like if we don't add another defender, like does he end up putting his name in the portal? It's hard to tell, and I don't think that any of these guys are leaving because they dislike the community at BSU or the culture that the team has built. It's been, Pole Camp is getting whispered in his ear from every direction that he needs to take the next step with his career. And like you said, he's proven that he can do it. If he only came in and scored, 15 points this year, yeah, he looked pretty good for flashes, but maybe they say, yeah, stay at the smaller league for a year and see if you can take the next step. And then we'll see after that if we want you to move somewhere else. But he just came in and dominated from the start. So, well, maybe not dominated from the start, but after a couple of weeks, he got his feet under him. And I think he improved a lot, especially after the World Junior Tournament. But yeah, I think that's a big selling point for the school. And that's something that you kind of have to adapt to I can't remember who it was. I was just listening to the pregame show that CHN did before the semifinals. I think it was Mercyhurst's coach that was on there. And he was talking about how when they're recruiting guys, now some of them, they literally just say, hey, use us as a platform to get to where you want to go, to get to a bigger university. And so I don't know if that's what Tom and crew are doing here at Bemidji, but that's you got to find a route when you're a smaller school like that to get people in the door. And you just got to get creative with it in today's transfer portal environment.
Yeah, it's going to be what programs and what coaches can adapt to it, especially at these smaller institutions, and utilize the transfer portal to their benefit, because it's not going anywhere. It's going to be here to stay. And I think even this is the last year of the COVID years, so now players that are seniors next year, that really is their last season. They don't get that option of returning for a fifth year anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see what changes with the transfer portal when those players kind of when that rule just kind of drops off. And yeah, I think college hockey is just in general entering a really challenging time right now, and it'll be kind of curious. I'm just curious to see what happens here the next couple of seasons.
Well, and it's not only with the portal of like, hey, use us to get to where you want to go. It's also a good landing spot for, maybe you're a prospect who thought you were, a guy that could play in the Big Ten or the NCHC or out East. And okay, maybe you're not that player yet, or maybe, just come to a Bemidji State where you can play in the CCHA and have a nice career. It's that landing spot for guys who maybe took a step too high and needed to come back down and play in this league. And I think that's the other thing. And that's where the portal taketh away and the portal giveth, where you do lose an Eric Polkamp and you're not going to get another one back in the portal, but can you snag a couple guys who, need to kind of have a fallback in a way, or come here and play a little bit, or somebody who, comes to a conference adjacent and do that, who wants a change of scenery. That is where a school like Bemidji State, you'd think, Lucas, can use the portal to their advantage.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of examples of that happening, but it hasn't been as frequent as I think a lot of smaller schools were hoping it would be. Like Jack Works transferred from Denver to Michigan Tech. He, played in just a handful of games at Denver and has been a really key person or player for the Huskies the last couple of seasons. But more often, and honestly, I think that situation is actually going to dry up a little bit with the fifth year ending. A lot of those players that kind of dropped down from the Blue Bloods to a more, CCHA or Atlantic hockey team did so because of fifth years coming back. I think actually now that those roster spots are going to remain there for them at bigger institutions, I don't think you'll see as many players kind of drop down to the smaller schools.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think it hasn't been quite as prominent as you would think, especially with the fifth-year guys. I made the example of a team like Minnesota, who might have been expecting to lose a guy like Jimmy Snuggerud this offseason. And so you look at the forward lines on that team and you're like, all right, now we've got some guys that are younger that we can move up the depth chart. And then Snuggerud expects to come back this next season. We'll see if he does. And they get a guy like Matthew Wood in from the transfer portal. So those forwards now that are buried in Minnesota, maybe they get frustrated that they're going to be a bottom six forward yet again this next season, but you really haven't seen those guys move out of the program and really impact, at least maybe we haven't here at Bemidji. But, you know, and I think that there's something to be said with the transfer portal, with bigger schools kind of being able to steal players from whoever they want. You know, I think that they're going to benefit from it. And I think that you might see some instances just like the Jackson Panzer instance where, and I don't know if that's officially why he swapped from UND to Bemidji, but I think that the story was he was expecting to get time at UND next year. For whatever reason, they told him he wasn't going to get it. Maybe they told him he was going to go back to juniors. Again, I don't know officially if that's the story or not.
That's what I heard, yeah.
Yeah. And so now he is like, well, I want to play college hockey next year. If it's not going to be in North Dakota, cool. Bemidji will take me. You know, like you might see some more of that type of thing where big schools like UND, Minnesota, Michigan, they have recruits that they just don't have room for because, oh my gosh, this guy we didn't expect to see in the transfer portal. We're going to have him over this guy. Maybe you'll see some of that, but overall, I think it's going to help bigger schools more than it's going to reciprocate back to the smaller schools, which hopefully is not a trend that continues, but we'll see. That's what it looks like right now, but I don't want to hit the panic button.
I think it will be. I think the smaller schools have one bullet left in their chamber, and they're going to shoot it here at the coaches meeting in early May, and that's going to be major junior players and trying to get major junior players eligible, players coming from the OHL, the QMJHL, and the WHL. That would just, you know, widen the player pool or increase the amount of talent that these smaller schools can recruit from. I think that's the one thing college hockey really needs for parity to continue as it has over the last couple of decades. And, you know, they're going to start having those discussions in about 2 or 3 weeks here. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of those coaches meetings about that.
Yeah, I heard, I think it was Mike McMahon bring it up. He's like, man, it'll be interesting to see if this is the trend and it continues, how many different teams over the next decade actually make a Frozen Four. And like, if it's a surprisingly low number of teams, you know, as college hockey continues to expand, I wonder if we do see more of a kind of like basketball where you've got major conferences and then you got mid-major conferences like the CCHA and Atlantic Hockey, and we'll see what happens with the Ivy League or the ECAC if the Ivy League actually splits off or something. I have no idea. But it's all kind of just speculation for now. I don't want to dread it too much. And, you know, like at the end of the day, I guess for a team like Bemidji, most years you are kind of just hoping to win your conference tournament. And like even at the CCHA's peak, it was mostly just like Mankato or even the WCHA. Like it's mostly just Mankato or Michigan Tech. Maybe we have 2 teams in an at-large spot, and then we can get a third team in there if somebody steals a bid. But I mean, I'm hoping that it's just not as bad as it was this last year. I would like to have maybe something more to play for at the end of the year.
Yeah, and we haven't even touched on NIL yet, but maybe we should avoid that for a while.
I mean, I'm not brushed up enough on like the intricacies of all what NIL is, and like I know that you can. I think that the intention of it was to just like be able to, hey, if you want to shoot a car commercial where you're on campus here, like exactly what Pole Camp did with Deerwood Bank this year.
Yeah,
I think that was what the intention of it originally was, and I'm hearing now that like schools are telling their donors to donate to the NIL like fund instead of like the school itself because they've promised the coaches a specific amount of NIL money that they're going to have to work with. It's just a huge, the cat's out of the bag type situation. They didn't really think it through fast enough or thorough enough before they kind of opened the door to all of this chaos.
I was listening to Beyond the Pond this weekend, and they had Frank Serratori on, who's the head coach at Air Force and Tom's brother. And he had a quote where he was like, you know, the blue blood programs are always like the most attractive girls at the party. You know, you add NIL in there and suddenly they have a personality too. And it's just like, you're going to have players that are now gonna, just go to these blue blood schools, because not only are you going to get the exposure playing in these big time conferences, but they can also pay you now too. So,
yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
There's only so many Deerwood banks we can go to.
True. Do we want to jump forward into previewing like next season, perhaps, and what we have as expectations moving forward?
I think so.
Yeah, looking at some of the guys we're bringing in, who do you kind of expect will get big minutes? I mean, if we're looking at all three of those seniors on the forward lines coming back, it's kind of a logjam in the forward room to get many minutes. What do you expect to see from guys like Panzer and Isaac Johnson next season?
Yeah, I think those are the two that I'm most excited about. And the two I think that can make the biggest difference in the forward room next season. Isaac's been playing in the USHL for the past couple of years. I think he's actually a 2005 birth year. He skipped his senior year of high school at Fergus Falls to go play in the USHL, and he's up to. Yep, exactly. And he, out of high school, he was a pretty highly regarded recruit. I think they had him at Neutral Zone had him as a 4-star. He ended up dropping down either last offseason or sometime this year. I think they have him.
Didn't you just tweet today how unreliable Neutral Zone is?
Yeah, for class rankings for sure. But I do like being able to read their scouting reports and getting kind of an idea of individual players. But as an overall class ranking, it's not the most reliable system.
We're looking at you, Northern Michigan.
I was about to say, somebody needed to bring that up. There's no way they had the top recruiting class, right?
So Neutral Zone has them as bringing in 17 recruits next season, which isn't happening. They're going to bring in 11, basically, is what I've heard. But so
a lot of it's quantity over. Well, they do have some quality guys, but like the main reason they're number one is just because they have so many like guys on the list that they're bringing in. So.
Yeah, they're going to have 5 or 6 draft picks next season, or guys that could get drafted, that are either drafted or could get drafted in this upcoming recruiting class and in the transfer portal, because they just landed a 3rd round pick from New Hampshire in the portal today too. So yeah, I know we like to make fun of them for having all those guys transferring out, but I don't think the drop off. I think they could actually be an improved team next season. But
they finished 6th, so
yeah, I guess it wouldn't be that hard.
5th. I think it was 5th technically.
Yeah, because they went to Mankato.
It really doesn't make a difference one way or the other if it's 2nd or 7th. So
yeah, but I'm just looking at the forwards coming in. Yeah, Isaac and Jackson Panzer both played in the USHL this season and played big minutes. Both are centers, which is a position of need for this team. So you kind of hope that one, if not both of them, at least gets an opportunity to play that 4th line center role, if not higher in the lineup this upcoming season. I think Jackson Panzer's numbers have been really good this year, and he's put up pretty good production for not playing on the power play for Sioux Falls at all. So he's kind of a player I'm excited about. The other forwards that I have projected coming in next season are Lucas Brennan, who did play in the USHL with Cedar Rapids and also with Omaha this past season. Was drafted pretty high into the USHL last offseason. I think he was the 7th overall pick in the phase 2 draft in the USHL, but never really got anything going. Has been kind of a healthy scratch as of late towards the end of this season. So he's a guy that just needs a fresh start, and hopefully coming to Bemidji, he's definitely a skilled guy. He put up huge numbers in the Manitoba League the season prior. So he's a guy that can score goals, just never really, things never really clicked for him in the USHL. And then they're also bringing in Evan Hunter, who's a top 2 scorer for a Bismarck Bobcats team in the NHL too. So they do have some guys that have put up big numbers in junior hockey. And guys that should be able to contribute probably on the bottom 6 forward groups, but certainly some talent there.
You have 2 defensemen slated to come in next year, at least according to your projections. I know that Luke Roloffs is not super exciting, at least in terms of guys that we're bringing in. And then it's Parek, I believe. Is that how you pronounce that last name?
Isaac Parek. He's playing in the BC British Columbia League right now, and is a top 5 scorer among defensemen in the BCHL. should be able. I mean, he's going to be the only right. Well, he might be the only right shot defenseman we have next season.
Fingers
So
crossed.
we'll see what happens the rest of the transfer portal season here. But
They're just going to give Will Magnuson a right shot stick and tell him to figure it out.
oh man, who knows? Because he's the only right shot defenseman, he's going to play probably on second or third pairing, defensive pairing for this team, probably third. But yeah, and Luke Roloffs is a top pairing defenseman for Bismarck as well in the NHL. His offensive numbers certainly aren't there, but he's going to be a guy that, they probably are looking at molding and developing into a solid defensive defenseman for this team. Bigger guy. He's going to provide some physicality that this team's kind of lacking on the blue line right now. So yeah, I think those are both, guys that could see minutes this upcoming season. They might give Roloffs another year of just kind of practicing and developing. He doesn't have the option to go back to junior, so we know for sure. Oh, I don't think either one of them. Yeah, they're both 2003 birth years, so they're both going to be here next fall.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm excited to have at least something right shot defenseman on the team. It's right now, like we're looking at 8 defensemen on the team next season, which is a little bit of depth. And I think I'm not trying to, slander Atchison or anything, but he's a depth guy that it does hurt to lose because of the fact that, we went through so many injuries this year and guys leaving for the World Junior. I don't know if we have any guys projected to do that next year. Probably not, but like stuff happens and you want depth guys to be on your team. I think we were, even with a crowded forward room this year, still scraping guys onto the ice at some points of the season. So I think that's really where that hurts. 8 is a pretty comfortable number, but again, would I object to them bringing a right shot defenseman in? Absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, they carried 9 defensemen last season and all of them played. You're talking about Logan Atchison. He played in 28 games this last season and had to play a lot of games down the stretch just when they were dealing with, absences for the World Juniors and with injuries. So, right now I think I have them projected at having 28 guys on the roster. Or maybe only 27, depending on what they do at goaltender. So I still think they'll probably add another defenseman. But yeah, it's one of those things where you have to have the scholarship money available to bring in a guy out of the transfer portal too. You only have your 18 scholarship limit, and you can divvy those up among players. But if the money's not there, maybe they don't have the resources to bring a guy in right now too.
And then finally, at goaltender, you have 2 projected to come in. Do you think that that's going to happen, or do you see either of those guys making an impact? Probably not in year 1 with Scholl coming back for his senior season. But what do you think of the 2 goaltenders that are projected to come in?
Yeah, I think there's only going to be they're probably going to pick one of them to bring in this season and have the other one come in after Scholl's senior year. I just don't know which one because they're both 2004 birth years. They both have another year of junior eligibility left. Andrew Ness is splitting time right now in the BCHL with the Penticton V's, who are a really good team, but he's splitting time with a St. Thomas recruit actually at goaltender, Will Ingeman, both of whom have put up really good numbers in that league. And then Trent Weimken is with Austin in the NHL and has really good numbers there too. Like you said, it doesn't really matter which one they bring in. They're probably going to be the 3rd goaltender this season. I don't see them getting playing time over Scholl or even, Rathan Robbins is probably going to be your primary backup getting the occasional start too. So, with goaltenders, I always think it's better to have them play as much as possible. I think that's the best way for a goaltender to develop. Yeah. So it's one of those things where usually, Bemidji State traditionally doesn't bring a goaltender in until they're out of junior eligibility. So yeah, I really don't know which one they're leaning towards bringing in. It's going to be a interesting decision to be made, and we'll see when the roster gets revealed which one they did.
All right. So any other couple things that you want to get across, Ian, because I do want to save the last, handful of minutes for the show talking about women's hockey, just because there was a pretty eventful week going on. So anything else, Ian or Lucas, that we want to talk men's hockey wise before we kind of shift over to the women's side?
Well, there's still a lot kind of to move into place with transfers happening still across the conference. But what are your way too early expectations for where this team could be finishing next year in the CCHA race?
Yeah, it's so hard when you don't have the rosters of all the other teams in front of you yet. Like I kind of mentioned, I don't think Northern Michigan's really going to drop off too much. Or, they'll probably be in the mid pack. Um, Mankato really hasn't. Well, yeah, Mankato lost Souter and some of those.
Morton,
Yeah, Morton. That's who I'm thinking of. Um, it's so hard to tell without having all these transfers finalized yet. But I think
right?
Bemidji State in general is in a pretty good spot. They should be competing for at minimum home ice, I would say, in the CCHA, which is just such an easy way to cop out of that question and just say, yeah, compete for home ice. Like that should be the expectation every year. But it
Yeah,
really is for this program, I think. Um, yeah, there's some big holes to fill. I still have some questions just about the roster makeup of this team, but I think they should be at minimum competitive in the CCHA and have a shot at a McNaughton Cup again.
All right.
absolutely.
Anything else you guys want to touch on for men's hockey?
I don't think so. I think I've covered everything I needed to get out of the way.
All
I'm
right.
very happy Travis Winters decided to stay at Bemidji as an associate, or that Lindenwood, I guess, passed over him Travis Winter, associate head coach at with the Beavers, had interviewed for Lindenwood's head coaching job, and Lindenwood ended up going with Bill Muckalt, who is a former Michigan Wolverine associate head coach. So, I think we talk about some of that player development, especially in the among the defensemen that Bemidji State has done so well with. And I think Travis Winter's a big part of that. So it's it would have been a good move for him, obviously, to become a head coach. And Bemidji State as a program can say, once you start developing associate coaches or assistant coaches to be head coaches elsewhere, that's a good thing for the program. But selfishly, I'm happy he's staying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And speaking of, this is a good segue. Speaking of assistant coaches who get that jump up to head coach, Jim Scanlan stepping down after 10 seasons at the helm. And then now his successor had her introductory press conference. Me and Ian did the podcast like probably a half an hour before her introductory press conference last week. So as soon as like we were wrapping up, we're like, oh, I guess she's doing a press conference. It would have been cool. We could have waited like a half an hour before we started recording, but that's how podcasting goes. So I immediately think that the moment we hit end on the record that we're going to have a big transfer for men's hockey. But Lucas, a lot of stuff happening for Bemidji State women's hockey. And obviously it's a big change, and it's not that it's surprising. I think it's not, I think just with the way the program had been the last couple of years, but does it still surprise you that it happened and just kind of the timing of it?
Yeah, I thought Jim would be here until he decided to retire. So I thought it was kind of an interesting time for him to decide to step away. And when they hired Amber Fryklund back last summer as an associate head coach, it kind of seemed like that was maybe a plan for a successor to Jim,
like a coach in waiting kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. And Amber's been in this program for so long, and she's interviewed for other head coaching positions in the past. I know she interviewed for the Minnesota State vacancy, maybe a decade ago now, back kind of in her first stint at Bemidji State. So, yeah, it's definitely came at an awkward timing, but I think based on kind of the fact that we haven't seen like an exodus of players to the portal, or we haven't really seen much activity there, that it is probably expected in the locker room. And I think having that succession plan and that easy transition to the new coach definitely helps with that. And yeah, I think it's a good step for the program. And I think it's going to be an exciting new chapter of women's hockey at Bemidji State.
Do you think that, we talked earlier about coaches and the transfer portal, the way it kind of seemed like, and obviously I don't have the article from Jared Roboto of the Pioneer in front of me, but did it kind of feel like the portal maybe kind of just burned him out a little bit? Or was it maybe just he felt it was time for a change?
I think, yeah, the portal, NIL, all of that kind of going on. I think that's going to start affecting, some of these more old school coaches. You see the comments being made among all of the, longer tenured coaches throughout men's and women's hockey. It's not what they were used to, or, what they're used to. It's not the environment that they really began coaching in. And yeah, it goes back to, like I kind of mentioned before, you have to adapt to it. You have to adapt, or it's, your program's just not going to have success in this era unless you have a coach that's willing to use the transfer portal and kind of go through these new challenges. So yeah, I definitely think that played a pretty big impact on Coach Scanlan's departure.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say about it. I mean, the women's hockey program's got its challenges ahead of it, regardless of who the coach is. And I think that the first step in embracing those challenges is going to be, I don't know that Jim was necessarily the issue, but I think maybe getting some new blood in there at a time where the program seems to be kind of stagnating is not necessarily such a bad thing.
And I think too, with that, obviously somebody who, like you talked about, Lucas, has been in the program before, somebody who obviously has deep ties to the Bemidji State program. That helps obviously try and get this off the ground. It helps try and get some stuff going. What excites you most about what she can do as head coach?
I think just provide a different perspective for the program. She's an awesome recruiter. I think she's, kind of in her last stint as Bemidji State's assistant coach. She pulled in some of the best talent that this team has had in the past couple of decades. So, I think that's an exciting thing. I think, she's going to go out there and be able to get good players to come to Bemidji State and hopefully start laying the building blocks for a successful program in the WCHA.
And last question I got for you about the women's hockey coaching change and Coach Fryklund coming in is, what are the expectations? Obviously, year one, we kind of know what the expectations are going to be, and that's just kind of to keep your head above water. But what do you think in 5 years, what do you think we're talking about with women's hockey?
Yeah, it's the WCHA is such a difficult conference, and you're always going to have that, those four teams at the top. It feels like, the Minnesotas, the Wisconsins, the Ohio States, and the Minnesota Duluths. They're just so well established now that it's going to be hard to compete with those teams at any level. But there's no reason Bemidji State can't be in, that next tier, the tier that's occasionally knocking off those teams, being able to pull upsets off in the first round of the WCHA playoffs, competing with St. Cloud, competing with Minnesota State. St. Thomas is going to get good quick too. So it's going to be a challenge no matter what, but there's no reason that this team can't be competitive and at least start looking at pulling off the occasional upset of those big teams, because that's kind of what we were used to with Bemidji State women's hockey a decade ago. Is they weren't going to be finishing top four in the conference, but they were still a team that those bigger schools didn't want to have to play in the first round.
Yeah, Ohio State wasn't going to walk in and go 10 donut on you, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, Ian, anything else about men's hockey, women's hockey, anything while we got Lucas in here? Otherwise, I think we've exhausted him.
Yeah, I think we're good to go, man. Good clean conversation today about hockey and kind of what to expect with the future. It's hard to project with so much movement around the conference. I mean, you can think anything you want about Northern Michigan, but it looked for a little while there like they were a favorite, one of the favorites to win the conference this year. And for a while you were like, are they going to finish 7th in the league? Like, you never know until you actually get on the ice and start playing games. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. Have a little bit of an off season now before we kick it back up next fall. We'll still be here for a couple weeks. That's not what I'm saying, but yeah, like in terms of hockey and how much you're thinking about hockey, it's starting to cool down, especially after the season has ended. So
we'll see. I know the NCHC is releasing their schedules next week, so hopefully the CCHA follows suit quick. And
yeah,
we'll be
schedules will
able
start coming out. Start putting
yeah,
that together.
Give us some content to talk about with hockey. That's all we ask, CCHA and WCHA. Please, if you just could do that, we'd be very appreciative. Ian, I know that there's something that you want to talk about here in the waning minutes of the podcast, so I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, so we have had something cooking for a couple of months now. We just started working on it earlier this hockey season, really. I think it was in November that we kind of made it public at all. Tight-knit circle. I think there's like 10 or 11 of us in there. But it's a great place to talk Beaver sports. And it is the Beaver Banter Discord server that we started up. Yeah, like I said, this year wasn't super public. Invited a couple people that I knew were close knit in the community. Just try some stuff out. It's been pretty fun. We do game day live threads every hockey game, and we absolutely could start doing that for other sports if we generated enough interest in those in the Discord server. But yeah, we want to open it up to the public. So whenever this goes live, I will create a link that you can click on any of our social media pages, and I'll post that on there. And yeah, feel free to join. It's a great place to talk Beaver sports, other sports, really anything. I mean, we haven't, it's nothing like crazy. You know, if you're in the Tech Hockey Guide Discord, that's got some more bells and whistles to it. And eventually we may get there, but yeah, it's just a pretty chill place to talk Beaver sports, I think. And Lucas has been in it. CJ's been in it. Not very active, I'll add, but he's there. But that's
It's only
fine.
so many hours in the day, man.
No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's fun. It's fun. And yeah, we want to open it up to the public. Invite whoever you want. We don't care as long as they're not gonna say anything. You know,
As long as they're willing to have some good old
as long
fun.
as they're PC, you know, like that's all we're asking, you know.
That's all. That's all. So again, one last time, where can they find that, Ian?
Yeah, so that'll be on the Twitter page. I'm assuming we'll get it up on Facebook as well. If you don't have either of those and you listen to the podcast and you want to get in on the action, find a way. I don't know. Shoot me a text if you got my number. CJ will have the link. Anybody that you know knows Beaver Sports will probably be in it. Send them a message. They'll find a way to get you an invite.
Can you put it in the link of the description of the podcast somewhere?
Yeah, we could. Oh, yes, we could do that.
What a brilliant idea!
There you go.
This is why we got Lucas here. And you know what, Lucas? We got only a couple minutes left, but why don't you plug Beaver Territory and where people can find all your great content?
Yeah, you can follow me at Beaver Territory on Twitter, on Facebook. I have a Substack, beaverterritory.substack.com, and that's where I post all of my random blog posts. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do this off season and next year too. So there's some good stuff out there though regarding recruiting and all that fun stuff. So
if you don't know how to stay on top of recruiting and college hockey and what BSU's roster is going to look like, Lucas is your guy. He does all the work for it and you can just enjoy. So Lucas, appreciate all the work you do. Thanks for coming on the podcast and we'll see you guys in the Discord, I guess.